and welcome to GearHeads. If any of you guys follow us on our Instagram account, if not you should, but you will notice I made a post very recently where I finally got a chance to put this Jeep on the lift at work, and I went through it and found a whole bunch of issues and things that are going to need to be addressed and need to be fixed on it. But today I'm going to be doing a service on it. I'm going to be fixing a couple things that are issues on it right now, and I'm gonna do it here at work because I'm already down here today and I get to use a lift. But don't worry, I won't be doing anything that you guys can't do at home with a set of jack stands. I'm basically gonna be doing an oil change, at least in this episode, and air filter, and then I'm gonna do a small inspection on the car and show you guys some stuff that you should look for on these Jeeps, just to take good care of them and help you find any potential issues that might arise later. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. If you're going to be repairing and fixing your vehicle yourself, performing an inspection is one of the most important things you can do. Changing your oil and filters on a set schedule is always a good habit to keep and a great way to help your car live and last longer and be generally better taken care of. But if you're not doing actual good inspections of things once in a while, you might miss some things that are starting to slip, something that might even potentially leave you stranded, or could just be more expensive to fix down the road because you didn't take care of it ahead of time when the problem first started arising. So I'm gonna go ahead before I start doing the service on this and show you some things to look for and a good list of things to always check no matter what vehicle it is you're working on every time you lift the hood. First thing I want to check on this car is going to be the air filter. I can only imagine it's very dirty after sitting for so long. Oh good, I can only use one hand, my left hand, because I'm holding the camera. Alright. Okay, so this looks like a Napa filter. And yeah, this thing's dirty. You can see all the blackness in there. If you spread this apart, there's a bunch of stuff caught in the middle on these. So this air filter is toast. I'm gonna go ahead and trash this thing, and I have a new one sitting on the shelf waiting to go in. So let's start looking at some other stuff. So looking down across the top of this valve cover, it's very apparent that this thing's been leaking for a while. You can see that it's just all grimy down here, and it's actually much worse if you get over to the back of the motor. It's pretty wet back there. So that's something that's going to need to be replaced soon, but I'm not doing that today. But it is on my list, and it's always great to have a list. Write down a physical list on a notepad or something like that so you know what your car needs, and you can schedule time for yourself to get parts ahead of time and work on it. I also see this leak right here. I'm not noticing a dropping coolant level in the car, so that's a good thing. My radiator's full, so you know, always good to check that. Make sure the car's not too hot if you're checking it. You don't want to burn yourself. But this car's been sitting a while. I drove it down here. But alright, that's full. It looks kind of dirty though. I probably should do a flush on this thing soon, so maybe we can do that another day. But at least the level's good, even though I'm starting to develop a leak here. And from what it looks like, it's slowly coming up from this hose. So that's not a big deal. This is a simple repair to do. And I'll do that soon, so I'll write that down to my list. And another good thing to always check for, other than your fluids, always check all the fluids, and if you do see something low, start looking for leaks. Now the power steering fluid, let's take a look at this. The level looks okay, it's a little bit low. However, I know it's leaking because I checked it the other day and it's actually leaking from the steering box itself. I'll show you that to you guys when I get underneath the car after I lift it up. My battery seems to look okay. The car still starts fine every morning. I'm not noticing a bunch of corrosion buildup from battery acid leaking or anything like that, so that's good. Another thing I always want to check is your belt down here. So let me see if I can show you, but this belt is actually starting to crack right in between the ribs. So let me see if I can focus on it. If you can see the ribs in the belt there, it's actually starting to crack horizontally in those ribs. So this belt's also going to need to be replaced soon. All right, and I also want to go ahead and check my brake fluid level, which the fluid level itself is good. It's right in between the full and add marks, like right in the middle. The fluid on this actually looks decent. I think it's been flushed before. It's not the original. If you want to check your washer fluid or just top that off, that's always a good thing to have too, so you can wash your windshield. And even though we're doing an oil change and putting fresh oil in it, it's always a good habit to go ahead and actually check your oil. I'm going to pull the cap off because we are doing an oil change. And let me go ahead and pull this out and get a rag. It's always important to check your oil before you change it because you want to see if it's low, and that will at least tell you how much you're leaking in between oil changes. So if your vehicle's leaking, which if it's an old Jeep like this, it's probably leaking. But it'll let you know how much you're leaking or burning if your motor burns oil. So Wiped it off, put it back in, and you can look at the condition of it. So let's see here. This oil level is actually pretty good. It's high, so that's kind of surprising because this thing leaks a lot, and I haven't topped it off at all since the last oil change. But it's still at the top full mark. So here, actually, I'll leave it like that, so I remember to make sure this thing gets all filled up. And then I'll check the training fluid level as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the vehicle and just let it run in park, and we can check the level that way. All right, now the air cleaner is a little louder since I have the box and the filter out. And that's okay, we're only gonna be running it for a minute like this. Let's check the training fluid level. That's not good. Okay, so most importantly, when you're checking your transmission, you want to see what the level is and you want to see the condition of it. This is bad though. I haven't checked my training fluid level in a little while. I did top it off, I think 3 months ago or so, which is the last time I checked the training fluid level because it was getting a little low. This stick is pretty much dry. It's a little bit wet on the end, but that's about it, and that's not good. So obviously I need to top this off as well. I noticed there is a leak coming down there from the transmission. I'll show you that to you guys as well when we put this thing up in the air. But I'm gonna need to top this off, and I think the fluid's pretty dirty. I probably should flush it sometime soon. Thing is though, this thing has so many miles on it. I anticipate at some point swapping this transmission out and maybe putting a 5-speed in this thing or something else, because we would also like to do a 4-wheel drive swap in this thing at some point because it's 2-wheel drive. Who wants a 2-wheel drive Jeep? But when you do that, I believe you have to change either part of the rear case on the transmission, and then you have to disassemble part of it to do that, at least from what I've heard, or swap a transmission with it. So I'm probably gonna actually try and do a manual transmission swap into this thing when we do 4-wheel drive eventually. So I would just want to keep nursing this one along to last until then. But this thing doesn't get driven as much as it used to. So keep in mind, we can go through this thing and find problems all day, but if this is a very old vehicle, you don't put a ton of miles on it and you don't want to put a ton of money and effort into it, just fix the important things and keep your fluids topped off. All right, time to lift this thing up in the air and take a look underneath. Okay, so let's go underneath this thing, get my flashlight on here. Now look at how wet this is, guys. This is all soaked down here. It's definitely leaking some engine oil from under the crank seal. I can see it if I look behind this pulley down here. You can notice how it's definitely leaking a little from the top from the valve cover because there is grease and stuff up there, but down here it's very wet, and that's coming from the front crank seal. So I don't know, we might replace that when I do the belt. Just crank that pulley off. Crank that crank pulley off, replace it. We'll see. This steering box is leaking as well. It's actually leaking right from the end right in here. And that shaft is loose. I checked it out the other day, and that shaft actually has some play in it, as well as the joint here going into this pitman arm. So I will do my best to show you guys actually a little bit later how to check the front suspension on this thing, because these Jeeps, you know, if you actually drive it like a Jeep and take it off in the dirt and stuff once in a while, you're going to be wearing through your suspension components a lot faster than you might if you're just, you know, daily driving a car on the highway every day. But in any case, that's definitely a cause for concern. We need to make sure I'm not leaking that much fluid all the time. It looks like these training lines might be leaking too. Let's see here. Yeah, I believe that transmission line's also leaking, so that's part of the reason I was not finding fluid in the tranny. But anyways, those are the cooler lines. They come from the transmission and come up here to keep it all cooled off. So let's go back here. Once again, the transmission pan here is soaked. I am suspecting that the rear main seal is leaking in here, and actually I think I confirmed it before. I was able to look up in there with a mirror, and if you want to, you can pop this shield off too. I think you have to pull the starter on this thing to pop that shield off. Anyways, the rear main seal is definitely leaking because we're getting a lot of engine oil back underneath here, but more importantly, I want to clean all this while it's up on the lift too. And then I can see how much is coming from which spot, because I know the valve cover is leaking and probably causing some of this wetness down here as well. And then back to the back of the transmission, you see that exhaust mount, and then this transmission mount here is all wet, and that's all coming from up here. This output shaft seal on the back of the transmission is also leaking, so that needs to be addressed. And the drive shaft actually seems to be okay. You can check it by shaking it up and down and seeing for play in the U-joints. So at least for me, moving this one up and down, it's actually super solid, so that's good. Don't have to worry about those. This one up here, you'll notice there's a little bit of movement, and that's actually kind of normal for a lot of vehicles. There's a little bit of play where it goes into the transmission. So don't be surprised if the whole thing moves a bit, but make sure you watch the actual U-joints themselves for play inside of them, and this one does not have that at all, so we're good there. While you're checking the car out, also check out the rear axle. If it's a four-wheel drive, then do the same thing and check the front axles, but just see if you're getting any wetness in here, because if you are, and the back of this is getting wet or it's wet down here, you have an axle seal leak, and that can ruin your drum brakes and potentially make them fail on you completely if you don't address it soon enough. And while you take it apart, it's usually a good idea just to replace the drum brakes anyways. It's always a good idea to try and check your brake pads. I don't know if I can show you on the camera, but you can kind of at least get a good idea if you try and look from an angle in here. Like I said, it's hard to show on the camera. Just look at the pad itself and see how much life is left in it. These ones seem to be okay for now. Luckily on these Jeeps, they're super easy to replace quickly if you want to just do a pad slap and not do a rotor swap as well. Okay, so I think that quick inspection, just walking through and visualizing everything, showed you guys a lot of stuff you could potentially look for. And we did obviously find a bunch of issues here and there, and I'm gonna prioritize myself when I need to replace each thing or you know, address them. But at least for now, that's a good start. So you got a list started for what your car might need, and you can prioritize for yourself how, you know, you want to go about fixing it, when you want to fix each part or whatever, maybe based on cost or based on severity of the problem. And another thing I do want to show you guys, but we won't do it in this video, but soon I'll do a video showing how to shake down the front end on these, because, or on these or on any car, it's always important to check out your steering and all the other components up there and make sure that everything's good. This one has some loose stuff, and I'll have to show it to you guys, like I said, in another video. But don't forget, when you're inspecting your car, you know, I showed you a lot of the issues, but check other stuff too, more than what I showed you. If you have a, you know, coolant low, check all your hoses, check your radiator, look for a leak somewhere. And I did find a small leak, but it's not actually dripping yet. It's slowly starting to seep, so the level's still good, but it needs to be fixed soon. Same thing, power steering, oil, transmission. If you got fluid low, it's going somewhere probably, so look around and try and find where it's coming from. And also check your other seals too. I showed you the valve cover seals leaking, check your crank seal, check your rear main seal. Sometimes they'll leak from head gaskets too. I've seen that happen before. And not even necessarily for Jeeps, any vehicle, but always just remember, just because I didn't show you doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking. Check around all the different spots in your car and look for potential issues. So anyways, with that being said, let's go ahead and service this thing, and then I can get started with the other stuff it needs. All right, just make sure you got something to catch the oil, and this one is a 5/8, or if you only have metric wrenches and you don't have a standard set, 16 millimeter will work. All right, that thing's done draining pretty much. It's gonna sit there and do a super slow drip for a long time, but I call that good. All right, next, reposition your drip pan. Let's take the oil filter out. Hopefully, can I get to it from this side? I was gonna try and get to it from this side so I don't have to block the camera for you guys. Oh, there we go. All right, it's pretty tight. Keep in mind, you can always buy an oil filter wrench to make this job easier. If you guys want to get an oil filter wrench, check the link in the description. I'll have one in there for you. They're not an expensive tool, and they can make doing oil changes much easier for you. See, I'm having to fight this one just like a 1/32nd of a turn at a time here, but it's starting to slowly get a little looser. There we go. There we go. Let it drain for a second. And then also check in the description. I'll have a link there, and you can buy a quality oil filter or oil for your Jeep if you want to find something just to have shipped to your door so you don't have to go out to the parts store. It is convenient and a lot of times can save you a good amount of money. Alright, I think that's about done draining. It'll probably spill some more once I get it off and turn it upside down. We'll see if I can keep the filter pointed up though. Yeah, see? It's going to get all over me. No! It's a weird spot to put your hand, especially when you're trying to film. There we go. Alright. I'm going to dump the rest of it in there. Wipe down all the areas that the oil spilled on its way down. A little extra oil won't hurt anybody though. That's just rust prevention. Alright, I've got my new oil filter here ready to go in a second, but when you take your old one off, just double check that the O-ring came off with it. If it didn't and it's stuck up there, you need to get that off before you put your new one on. Or first thing, when you turn the car on, it's going to spill oil everywhere. Also, don't forget, get some oil on your fingers and oil up the new O-ring so that it doesn't stick as well. That'll make your life a lot easier when you go to pull off the oil filter the next time, and it will also keep that O-ring from sticking and potentially doing causing what I just explained a second ago. You know, this one might actually be easier to reach from the top, but I got it from here. All right, let me get the drain pan out of the way so I can reach my arm up a little bit better and actually get it nice and snug. There we go. You don't need to try and pretend to be Hercules or King Kong tightening these things down. It's not necessary. Just keep going until you feel it get nice and snug, and you should be good. Alright, well, as far as the oil change is concerned, we're done under here for now, but before I put the Jeep down, I'm going to go ahead and just get some degreaser and some brake cleaner also. After the degreaser soaks in, I'm going to spray all the oil leaks that are down here right now with degreaser just so that it soaks in, and then I can spray it with brake cleaner and wipe off the rest, and that'll at least allow me to see next time I have this up on the lift or next time I crawl underneath it how much oil's leaking from each of those spots so that I know, what to go after first. Let me go ahead and clean this all up, and then we'll put the car back down. Alright, now that she's on the ground, let's go ahead and start out by filling it up with oil before we do anything else. And these Jeep 4.0s or AMC 4.0s take 6 quarts of 10W30. Alright, this was a 5-quart bottle, so I just got to throw 1 more quart in from the next bottle. Alright, 1 quart from this one, and then I'll just throw the bottle in the back of the Jeep. There we go, it should be about 1 quart. Yeah, it was a hair more than 1 quart, so that's okay. But I'll just go ahead and throw this in the back of the Jeep and keep it as spare in case I need to top it off, or just use the rest of it towards the next oil change. Now, a good thing to do is go ahead and start the engine, run it for like 10 seconds or so, look under the car, make sure you don't have any leaks, and then shut the car off, come back and check the oil level again after another 30 seconds or so, just to make sure your level's good. Because when you're running it, you're filling up that oil filter as well. So let's do that. All right, let's check the oil level now. Cool. We are right in the middle of the safe line, right where you want to be. Let's go ahead and throw an air filter back in here, and then I want to add some fluid to the transmission and check the level when it's running again. Before I start it up, I'm gonna go ahead and actually just throw in what I got left in here. It's about 3/4 of a quart of ATF. These take Dexron Mercon mix, and that's what I got right here. And then I think I've got some more around here somewhere. But last time this happened, it turned out it was pretty dang low on the stick, like it is now, barely showing. And it ended up only taking another 1.5 quart or two. So on these things, that doesn't mean the transmission's empty of fluid. So I'll throw that in. I'll go ahead and start it up. I'll get some more fluid, and then we'll check the level and see where it's at after adding this. It's still barely showing on the stick, so I need to add more. I'm gonna do another full quart. I'm gonna give it a second to run all the way down the dipstick tube, because sometimes it's really hard to read on the ATF, especially with ATF, because you have to fill it through the same hole you run the dipstick through, and then it's hard to find a line on the stick because it's all wet. Okay, there we go. I've got a good solid line right in the middle between OK and max. I'm gonna go ahead and add just a little more. Like right here's the max mark and right here's OK, and it's right in the middle of that. So I'm probably gonna add another 1/2 quart or so because I know it's leaking. So I'll fill it to the max, and I'm sure it'll be down a little bit sometime soon. All right, and the one last thing I wanted to do is go ahead and just top the power steering fluid off a little bit. It's not bad, it's actually pretty high, but well, I mean not high, it's not full, but it's not super low or anything. I know it's got a little bit of a leak though, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more fluid until it gets to the full mark on the stick. Okay, yeah, that level's good now. Well, awesome, I think we're pretty much done with the service for now. Alright guys, well that's it. I hope that you found this helpful. An inspection is such an important part of servicing your own vehicle. You want to be able to know at least what's going on with your car, and so hopefully, since I cleaned everything under there now, I'll be able to get a good idea of what leaks are the biggest and what needs to be fixed first. But anyways, at least it's got some fresh engine oil, a new filter, and it's got the topped off training fluid, which is obviously very important. You don't want to burn up your transmission by running it low, so make sure you're checking all these things once in a while. Let's see here. So I've got more projects I want to do on this thing, but that's it for this video. If you guys have any comments, drop them down below. And yeah, as always, keep wrenching.